Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this monogreen landfall deck updated with the Avatar expansion, which introduces, of course, Badger Mole Cub at 2 mana as a powerful ramp creature that lets us Earthbend onto a land. We have synergy with +1 counters as well as with landfall, so the Cub has a lot to offer in this deck, including potentially Earthbending onto some of our fetch lands, which we can then sacrifice to get them back and get more landfall triggers overall. And then a big payoff for putting a lot of lands in play is the Earthbender Ascension, which also lets us Earthbend, this time Earthbend 2, and then we get to search our library for a basic land, put it in play tapped, so that helps us ramp. And then with a landfall, we get to put a quest counter on the Ascension. At 4 or more quest counters, we also now get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control, and it also gains trample until end of turn. So that ability is very reminiscent of Bristly Bill, of course, which is also in the deck. The 2 mana 2/2 legend with landfall gives us a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and for 5 mana we can also double the number of +1 counters on each creature we control, so that can also take advantage of all the Earthbended lands that we maybe have in play. With the Cub we can also generate extra mana to activate Bill in the first place, and then the Cub also very synergistic alongside Lenor Elves, which can now tap for double green as opposed to a single green. And the extra mana from the Elves can also maybe set up a turn 2 Mossborn Hydra, which is usually the creature that wins the most games in this deck, as a 0/0 Trampler, enters with a single +1 counter, but with landfall we get to double the number of +1 counters it has, so that can get out of hand very quickly, especially when it's paired with either Bill or a fully leveled up Ascension, because then we get to first put the counters from Ascension or Bill onto the Hydra, and then double the number of counters afterwards, and that paired with a fetch land like Escape Tunnel or Fabled Passage, which can even get a land and have it enter untapped, can also trigger those landfall cards twice. And on top of that we also have Traveling Chocobo, which can also double all of those landfall effects, in addition to letting us play lands and birds off the top of the deck. So all those synergies combined can make one very deadly Hydra, even in a single turn where we get to attack with it. And then besides the Mossborn Hydra, we also have Tifa as another trampling landfall card that can essentially double its power with every landfall trigger. So this is another card that will heavily benefit from the +1 counters from Bill or Earthbender Ascension and the doubling effects from Traveling Chocobo, which can also, in addition to playing additional copies of itself off the top, play Sass Chocobo, which is another bird with landfall giving it a single +1/+1 counter, so still a great card to play early, so it can kind of snowball as we trigger more landfall. And then topping off our curve, I'm going with a full set of I Still Explore, which lets us play an additional land each turn, as well as replaying lands out of the graveyard. With landfall, we get to mill a card, which can put more lands into the graveyard in case we don't have a fetch land in circulation yet. But as soon as we have either Escape Tunnel or Fabled Passage, we can basically keep replaying those out of the graveyard over and over, triggering a landfall multiple times in the same turn, which can of course lead to some pretty quick wins if we have the right creatures on the battlefield. And then in addition to my 14 basic forests, I'm also running 2 copies of Basing Say, which can activate at sorcery speed to Earthbend 2, so that can make a hasty 2/2 creature. So especially in control matchups where the opponents may have lots of removal, having the ability to animate lands into threats is quite relevant. Even if the Earthbended land gets removed, it will come back, which is sometimes actually an advantage if they remove our lands, because then they come back and trigger landfall again, which can maybe enable some more of our synergies. And then especially in those control matchups, having an Ascension online in combination with a Basing Say can single-handedly take over a game, even if you're just drawing lands for the rest of the game. So yeah, that's my current build of monogreen landfall. A big omission that you might be mentioning in the comments is Snakeskin Veil, which of course can also come in handy in the more controlling matchups at protecting our key creatures, giving them hexproof and an extra counter. So that's another card you can certainly consider, maybe cutting 1 or 2 copies of another card to include it. But for now we're just going with a very streamlined all threats and all creature build. And then if you were trying to play this in best of 3, of course you can have Snakeskin Veil in the sideboard, and that will have some great moments there as well. But for now, let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand, assuming Elves into Hydra works out. And then double Chocobo to double those landfall triggers. So it's a very linear hand that's disrupted pretty easily, but it is powerful if we can get it going. Opponent blue-red, so maybe a Lessons deck. Those tend to have a lot of spot removal. So then the Hydra's unlikely to survive, but still gotta give it a shot. The alternative is waiting until I can grow it right away, so it can maybe dodge a burn spell. Then we of course start running into counter spells. They did not have a turn 1 answer to the elves, but they could have a 2-mana answer. I guess especially Iroh's removal spell that deals 1 to each creature would be painful. So maybe I will play it slow with a Chocobo here. Yeah, Iroh's Demonstration could deal 1 to each of my creatures, which would have been perfect for answering my board. Right, now they do have a Firebending Lesson. So they either drew into it or just didn't have the untapped red on turn 1 to take out the elves. So now I could play the Hydra, grow it twice. That could be worthwhile. Because yeah, 4/4 doesn't get answered even by the 2-mana lesson that counts lessons in the graveyard, unless they can add 1 more, I guess, then they could deal 4. So what's the alternative, I guess, to playing the Hydra? Going for an Ascension. Could also Earthbend onto the Fabled Passage. I actually don't hate that idea. Even though the Fabled Passage does come back tapped, it's a way to kind of ensure more landfall triggers in the future. And then for now I can attack for 2. So we've got a couple ways we can sequence next turn. Badger Mole Cub would be a decent draw, because then the Elves and Passage make extra mana. Opponent taps out for a Dragonfly Swarm. Okay, so now might be the time for Mossborn Hydra. Play a land. Could play the Chocobo, but then I don't have a landfall trigger afterwards. So I could just keep Fabled Passage uncracked to potentially trigger landfall with it. Because I would sack Fabled Passage and essentially get 2 landfall triggers with it. But if I wait for Traveling Chocobo, I might get even more. There's a Demonstration. So good that we played around it initially. And a Combustion Technique for 4. So yeah, I'm gonna sack Fabled Passage. And get a land. This saves the Hydra. And then I can still go Chocobo, sack Fabled Passage next turn, which should be more than enough. And even have an extra land to go with it. Beautiful. Make sure to resolve the Ascension before we resolve the Hydra's double. And kind of curious to do the math here, just to see how much damage we actually have. Because it is a lot. So let's view Battlefield. So we have 2 Ascension triggers on the stack thanks to Traveling Chocobo. So that's 2 more counters make it 12. Then double twice, make it 24, make it 48. Fetch again. I guess technically what I should do is fetch in response to the Hydra trigger resolving. So first we resolve 4 Ascension triggers. Hydra goes up to 14, and then we double it 4 times. So 14 turns into 28, turns into 56, turns into 112, turns into 224, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's more than 18. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Turn 1 Elves, turn 2 Cub is an option. Do have some tap lands to work through. But the upside seems high enough that I should still start with Elves. And then what I can also do is Earthbend onto a fetch land, so that if I sacrifice it, it comes back and essentially ramps me, even though we lose out on the extra creature that can tap for an extra green. So that's still potentially a play we could make. Versus turn 1 Recruit. Yeah, since we drew another Escape Tunnel, I kind of like this play. And then I don't even have to sacrifice it now. Can even jump a recruit with it technically. Although this one does have trample, so maybe less relevant there. Innkeeper's Talent can give a recruit an extra +1 counter. Alright. Probably gonna see them attack. No, they don't. Still gonna sacrifice this to search a land. Comes back tapped. But now we can sack it again, maybe trigger landfall in the process, and yeah, with the Mossborn Hydra against a deck that may not have a ton of removal, that seems powerful. And I can even play Tifa afterwards. Make sure that the Hydra gets the most counters possible. And then I can keep Escape Tunnel uncracked, just to trigger landfall again next turn, to pump Tifa. Badger Mole has done its job and can attack now. So we're in a pretty great position. Opponent's got their own cub. But yeah, Mossborn Hydra kind of dominates these green mirror matches if we can get it down early enough. Talon triggers. Take my turn, and an Ascension, not bad either. Play the Ascension. Could Earthbend onto one of these fetch lanes once again. And yeah, opponent's gonna scoop it up. Can do the math here to see how many landfall triggers we would get exactly, but I can guarantee this Hydra is lethal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Just need a third land and we're off to the races. Turn 1 Chocobo, turn 2 Tifa. And then Ascension gets us to I Still Explorer, which can keep chaining together more lanes. Facing mono black, so can expect a decent amount of spot removal. And yep, did not get a third lane, so that's not ideal. They might be saving an answer to the Ladder Elves now. If I do find a land, probably start with the Ascension just to get an extra land in play. The Traveling Chocobo is also better if we can maybe play a land over the top still. I see Ketramos, so this is kind of an exile control deck perhaps. Yeah, that does complicate matters. They could have ways to extract cards out of our deck as well. Have to be careful that they don't extract my forest, which could happen if we mill one with the Explorer. So, I mean, Hydra would be kind of the obvious play that our opponent absolutely has to answer, otherwise they're dead. So I could start there, might get hit by the end. Could go with the Ascension anyways. But then it could also extract forest out of my deck. I guess I'll go with the Hydra. Fetch now to grow the Chocobo. And if they deal with the Hydra, I get to hit them with the Chocobo in the meantime. Opponent's looking at the graveyard, sees exiles Fabled Passage and Tifa, so won't be able to get it back with the Explorer, which would have been pretty nice next turn. And another Shoot the Sheriff. Drawing a land helps. So, play Explorer. Kind of afraid of milling a land here, actually. Could just go for the Ascension, but again, Earthbending could also have its risks. I think we go with Explorer still. Try not to leave any lands in the graveyard. Might get hit by Ultima as well. Lantern's fine. So plenty of graveyard hate, which does affect the Explorer to an extent, but still beatable. Authority is fine too. And a Maze Mind Tome, so opponent is tapped out. If I draw a fetch land especially, we could go crazy with a Traveling Chocobo. So Mole's Cry. And we draw land. So, is our opponent just waiting to cast a sweeper? In which case, going for Traveling Chocobo might be a little greedy. But how much damage can I deal? Play this, play a land, trigger Sans Chocobo twice. And then there's a chance I can even play another land off the top. So I think I go for it. They do gain a life, admittedly. Get to mill 2 cards with the Explorer. So I can immediately play Forests before they get a chance to use Lantern. And that's now an attack for 11. And our opponent concedes. Alright, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a very straightforward hand. Turn 1 Elves, turn 2 Hydra. Turn 3 Hydra if the first one gets answered. We'll give it a shot. If we're up against another creature deck, this is great. If our opponent's playing control, this is probably not going to work out too well. And yeah, Watery Grave is not the color combination we want to be up against. Although, never mind, might be a graveyard deck. Although, never mind, Stormbrood. Typically not part of your Kevero combo decks. But who knows, maybe they're starting to adapt. Tapped Passage. Yeah, this kind of just looks like a Sultai control pile. Gonna go for the Hydra. Explorer is pretty nice to grow with the Hydra as well. Maelstrom Pulse, glad we didn't have 2 copies on the battlefield, as we draw another one. So, yeah, I guess I can play land and Elves. I don't think my opponent's necessarily playing sweepers that are kind of toughness based, but I guess they are playing the other dragons, so it's possible they can play the Regent, give my creatures -3/-3, and then Escape Tunnel would actually keep the Hydra alive. I can play it, don't need to sacrifice it yet. Alright, X equals 3, loses all abilities and destroy them. Yep, that's gonna take care of that one. Still gonna fetch here just to set up my Explorer a bit better. Although honestly, I might still want to play the Mossborn first. In which case I didn't necessarily have to sacrifice the fetch land. But now we've got another Escape Tunnel, can play the Elves. Alright, let's see if Hydra number 3 can get the job done. It does not. Okay, so now do I fetch? I already have a fetch land in the graveyard for the Explorer, so I'll keep this one around. Might get punished if I draw another 3-drop I absolutely need to cast. The Chocobo is a pretty good one. So we've got 2 more threats they need to deal with. Okay, pass a turn. We milled our last Hydra. So drawing the Earthbending Ascension would be pretty good. Alright, opponent's gonna wipe the board, unfortunately. Yeah, that's gonna deal with everything. I'll keep the escape tunnels in play to trigger future landfall cards. Luckily I didn't have any forests in my graveyard, or else my opponent could have extracted those out of the deck, and then landfall's not that easy to enable. Sass Chocobo is gone. Tifa's still good. Alright, is their deck all removal? Or can Tifa attack? Opponent's gonna stock up to find more answers. Yeah, I mean, the all removal deck is probably going to be pretty good against us, unless we find Basing Say to keep Earthbending onto our lands, and then eventually they'll run out. The Ascension would have been good to have in this matchup, although opponent I guess also has Maelstrom Pulse to destroy enchantments. But yeah, no land destruction as far as we can tell. So I can Badger Mole Cub onto the escape tunnel if I'd like. Let's just first see if there's any seeming response from our opponent. Not really. Let's try this. Can sacrifice it, get it back. And sacrifice again. So it's a pretty healthy attack here. Opponent's gonna wipe the board, mill half my deck. And Fabled Passage, so yeah, they milled both copies of Basing Say. Ascension, do we have any of those left? Yeah, still 3 Ascensions, so that would still be a good top deck. And now Monument can exhaust and mill me out completely. Alright, fair enough. So it was just a blue-black mill deck, splashing green for additional answers like Maelstrom Pulse. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a reasonable hand. Just need to land number 3. Opponent on a green deck with Recruit. We do not have a Hydra yet, which is usually the mirror breaker. But Tifa plus Chocobo with Ascension could still go over the top. I see, so it is actually rabbits. And yep, opponent's off to a pretty fast start. So we've got our work cut out for us. So I think the curve's gonna be Tifa into maybe Ascension and then Chocobo. Or we can go Chocobo into Explorer, and then that can be a way to pump Tifa a whole bunch. But yeah, opponent's got kind of the perfect curve so far. Suppose a Recruit could have been the frog that picks up counters, might have been even better. So do I take 7? Next turn I'm scheduled to take another 10-ish damage. So yeah, I really only have 2 more turns at most. But trading doesn't seem like the answer either. So take 7. Find another Tifa. So I really need to maximize my damage as much as possible. If I play a Chocobo this turn, that's all it really does. Get a Chocobo on the battlefield, and then next turn I can double the landfall triggers. So I would still need an untapped land in order to play the I Still Explore. Let's say I do. I get double the first land of Chocobo, Tifa to 2, then to 4, and then I can get back a fetch land, which then triggers twice as well. So then essentially get 4 more landfall triggers. So then 4 turns into 8, into 16, into 32, which would be lethal. But that assumes that I don't have to jump with anything, and that I draw an untapped land next turn. The alternative would be to play Ascension, but I also don't see me completing the quest here. So Chocobo might still be my best bet. Explore on top is not a great start. Another Mentor. So I can block a pair of 1/1s right now. So I don't have to chump with anything at least. But our opponent also has a bunch of toughness on defense. Still gonna take 8 and then hope that my next card down is an untapped forest. Fabled Passage is even better actually. Okay, so bump Tifa. Fetch. Play Explore. And get back Fabled Passage, could work. But this is already enough. But why not do it once more? So yeah, our opponent definitely started out on the front foot, but cards like Tifa and Hydra, especially when paired with the Chocobo and the Explorer, can catch you back up in a moment's notice and win the game out of nowhere. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. May need an extra land or two. But if the cup survives, we still have access to 3 mana. Opponent also on a green deck. So then I like having a hand with double Hydra. A Leyline Weaver, so our opponent's on the Badger Mole ramp deck, which might even go up to Craterhoof Behemoth. Getting a little nervous now, since we haven't drawn another land yet. And we will need those for our landfall synergies. Can always hope to play lands off the top with a Chocobo. Right, Tyvar's not that bad. Since they're not progressing their mana. And a Bill. So, maybe it's still worth it to play the Chocobo in the hopes of hitting a land off the top. Because if I don't, I'm in trouble regardless, because the Hydra wouldn't do anything. Alright, Elves coming up. So at least now, if there's a land coming up next, I can play Hydra and then trigger landfall. Which I guess I could have also done in the reverse order, but the upside here was maybe slightly higher if I did spike the land. Now Wild Guide with Offspring, so they are getting dangerously close to a Craterhoof. And I haven't gotten my Hydra into play yet. I found the escape tunnel, but is it too little too late? Another land coming up, so I don't need to fetch if I don't want to. And then, yeah, we'll see if we're dead. If they play Craterhoof, at least most of their creatures will be tapped. Although the Weaver would still get to untap, and Tyvar can get in. They would still need a land as well. So it's gonna be another Wild Guide. Okay. So I've got a chance to maybe kill them with a Hydra. And especially with another Chocobo or Bill, that could be feasible. So I'll take my draw. Another land on top, and it's even a Fabled Passage, that's the dream. So between Bill and Chocobo, since I can only cast one, it's probably going to be the Chocobo. Since doubling the Hydra's trigger is better than getting extra Bill triggers. But yeah, opponent scoops it up. That's going to be a lot of damage doubling. And the Hydra's going to get there before our opponent can maybe cast their Craterhoof. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a Sass Chocobo beatdown draw. Yeah, I'm here for it. The Cub can make us extra mana to maybe activate Bill sooner. Opponent presumably on the blue-reds kind of prowessy deck. So you can expect cards like Fear of Missing Out, Quantum Riddler. Well, so far they're mono blue. But they are planning to draw cards to enable their creatures. Okay, so this turn, still down to play the Cub. And I'll just stay put for now. So Opt lets them untap the seal. Knowledge Seeker picks up a counter. But yeah, once we get our landfall synergies online, our creatures should outsize the opponents. So they will need some instant speed bounce spells maybe to keep up. For now they are the ones delivering the beatdowns. Elusive Otter's fine. And we get to untap. Okay, so sequencing. Could go for Traveling Chocobo, see what's on top. Play land, play Sass Chocobo. Alternatively, I can go Bristly Bill, Sass Chocobo, play a land, wait for Traveling Chocobo till next turn. Maybe get a bit more board presence first, which I can get behind. Possible they're sandbagging a bounce spell. I'll play Basing Safe. I draw fetch land later, I may not have time to deploy it. And then Bill can put the counter on. Maybe the smaller Chocobo. Opponent's gonna opt now. So they must have more ways in hand to enable their creatures once again. Stay put. They are playing green, so they can maybe set up the Grove's Bounty. Alyush, okay, makes sense with all those islands. So they could still cast an instant for free here. No blocks. Alright, Hydra's gotta be pretty good. Although, is it better than a Traveling Chocobo here when I have Bill and double Sass Chocobo already in play? I think I start here. A fetch land is perfect. And even another creature I get to play. Beautiful. So, yeah, let's grow the Chocobo some more. Also reasonable to put one counter on the Cub, just so that can maybe benefit from doubling counters in the future, but I don't think the Cub's attacking. These two can get in there, and then I should still have enough on defense where I'm not just dead. And our opponent's already prepared to chump. So I'll hang on to the escape tunnel to maybe grow the Hydra next turn. Although it's possible I end up just activating Bill instead. If they keep up a bunch of mana, I'll have to be careful not to run into something like Aetherize bouncing all attacking creatures. Talon probably paired with Boomerang Basics. Opponent sacking a clue, which will untap the seal. And another talent. I guess we don't necessarily want to draw a forest next turn, so it is still reasonable to fetch end of turn. Alright, opponent's gonna pass. And then now probably still grow the smaller Chocobo. So if I play a land, I can activate Bill. So I might even put some counters on Cub and even Traveling Chocobo and set up a massive attack. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up here. Yeah, that's just too much for them to handle. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Still gonna go for turn 1 Chocobo. Unsure if I wanna wait on Bill and get my fetch lane down, so I can guarantee a 3-drop against the red-whites. So it could be a more controlling deck. If I go Bill here, I get punished by Pyroclasm, which could be an option. So let's just go for Fabled Passage. Fetch now, get in for 2. And then next turn I can maybe start with an Earthbender Ascension. So this Mardu Colors, Voice. Could be more of a sacrifice deck with Sephiroth, which plays well with Immobilize cards. So then putting a creature in play that can profitably block a Voice could be relevant. Traveling Chocobo would be one of those, as opposed to going for the Ascension. Badger Mole plus Ascension also pairs well as a way to quickly empty my hand. Could also go Ascension and not attack with a Chocobo, although feels like leaving damage on the table. So I'm still gonna just go for Traveling Chocobo, I think. Just so we have a blocker for Voice, so it doesn't get a free attack if they play Sephiroth. And then hopefully see a few lands on the top of the deck I get to play next turn. Iro T-Master instead. So they're going to be gifting me Greed's Gambits. In which case I do need to try and get lots of small creatures in play, so I don't lose my more important ones. Another Chocobo on top. Could play it. Hope there's a land after. Or I can Earthbender Ascension, which also shuffles, and then there could still be a land next. That might be better, because I already have a Chocobo in hand. I do not have removal for Iro, so if they have their enchantments next turn, I could be in trouble. And yeah, no land off the top is not ideal. So Chocobo can attack. Yep, Greed's Gambits. Yeah, this is not great for me. A land I'll take. So now it's probably a matter of trying to get the Hydra in play as soon as possible, because that can maybe go over the top if they don't answer it. Cub can also give me extra mana. So if I play Cub, I still have 4 mana, so then I can still play Hydra, play a land. So let's start there. Get a whole bunch of triggers. Fetch land coming up next. And then I guess I'll grow the Hydra, or I can grow the Chocobo, so it gains trample till end of turn, so I can set up a decent attack. And then I can still play Bill with a floating mana. Get in there. And then I'm gonna discard, sacrifice a creature. Sacrificing a land triggers landfall again, so that's not too bad. And our opponent's blocking with everyone. I'll let go of the Chocobo, I think. Land comes back, does me a favor. Get a million more triggers. Yeah, the Hydra's already big enough of a threat. So we just want to spread out our counters to maybe activate Bill next turn. So many counters. Alright. Seems pretty good. Terminus is fine. Nowhere to run answers Bill, I guess. Or the Chocobo. Takes out Bill. Could have maybe played around it by giving it an extra counter. But yeah, I'm assuming they have instant speed removal for the Hydra, otherwise they're super dead. But for now, Explorer into Fabled Passage seems like the play. And our opponent scoops it up, alright, so despite Iroh enacting its game plan perfectly, we still got there. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Elves plus Cub can generate a lot of mana, so we'll start there. And then we can maybe use that mana to activate Bill a bunch. Opponent on the Lessons deck, so we can expect a decent amount of interaction as well. But yeah, I think maybe going Chocobo into Cub makes the most sense to maximize our landfall triggers. Could also go Cub into Bill, although then Bill's maybe going to get zapped before we get any extra counters. Yeah, let's do that. Cub is probably target number 1, so that's dealt with. And opponent's going to bounce the Chocobo as well. So Grand gets to attack, maybe discard another lesson. Okay, so the discount is enabled. Now with the forests, I could go Sass Chocobo into Traveling Chocobo. Or maybe we get Bill online first, which is also reasonable, since I wouldn't get any value of Traveling Chocobo right now. So Sass Chocobo into Bill, so I'm not going to be attacking here. And then where to put the counters, interesting. So they already have plenty of lessons for their bigger removal spell that tracks lessons in the graveyard. So it's mostly the 1 and 2 damage removal spells we have to consider. I don't really want to lose Bill to a firebending lesson if I can avoid it, because it is pretty important here with this hand. But it already has kind of the biggest target on its back, so maybe it's still Bill anyway, just to play around another firebending lesson. Opponent light on red mana at the moment. Plays Monument for 2. And sadly they had a combustion technique as well. So Grand can attack, trigger the Monument. Yeah, that's too bad. There was maybe another consideration for growing the Chocobo instead. Opponent going for treasure instead of drawing, so I guess I could have an Iroh's Demonstration, deal 1 to everything, so then if I block it's a disaster. I'll take the 1 damage. Opponent passes, and an Ice Still is great, although I think it's still maybe better to Traveling Chocobo right now, just to grow Sass Chocobo a whole bunch more, and then Explorer would be great as a follow-up to that. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Another Bill on top wouldn't be a bad draw, honestly, so I don't have to shuffle. Opponent's going to abandon attachments, which also triggers the Monument once again. And yeah, let's just attack for 4. It's gonna be hard to keep Grand at bay if I keep the Chocobo back, I feel. Just need to try and overpower them. So they didn't have an Iris demonstration earlier, but they could have drawn into another copy. Now I might be tempted to still block if I get the chance. Our opponent had another lesson. So that happens. A red land enters tapped, could be relevant. Okay, so going for ice still is option 1, option 2 is Bristly Bill, and then I get to fetch, and then I get 1 extra landfall trigger. Explorer seems a little bit better. And then I guess I wait to fetch, because there's no real concern. I guess they could technically have a counterspell too, the Quench. So that's maybe still an argument for Bill. Yeah, you know what, let's go Bill first. It did not seem like they had the counterspell. Can fetch. And I'll still go counter on Bill again to play around an unkicked firebending lesson. But now I can just send the team. Opponent's at 8. And Explorer can represent a bunch more damage with a fetch land especially. Alright, and Grand does not get the job done, so bit of a strange game. Feels like our opponent maybe had the tools they needed, but maybe just didn't draw into more removal afterwards. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with decent hands. Elves into Badger Mole can lead to some explosive starts, although facing a mountain, so my elves may not survive this. Still worth a shot. So assuming the elves gets removed, turn 2, still leaning Badger Mole Cub. Small argument for Llanowar Elves plus Fabled Passage to get the tap land out of the way, although I may actively want a landfall trigger for Hydra. Our opponent shocks the elves. Also probably want to only play the Hydra once I can immediately grow it so it doesn't die to a smaller burn spell. And yeah, especially now with the extra forest, I'll play the Cub. So if my stuff survives, I could go Hydra plus Fabled Passage, make it a 4/4. Or at least threaten to, and then save the passage until I play the Chocobo. Yeah, I'll take 5. Bill's not bad either. So I actually have a few options. If I go for the Hydra and they can't deal 4 damage to it, it could easily win me the game on the following turn already. So it definitely has the highest upside. If they can deal 4, my follow-up of Bill and Chocobo is still decent. So yeah, let's go for it. So if they don't force me to fetch, I will keep my Fabled Passage around. Now the Cub could trade, although I suppose keeping the Cub alive allows me to play the Chocobo before playing any land or fetching, so it still has its advantages. So 3 cards in hand. Heartclaw, that's fine. And a Magebane Lizard, alright, so opponents may be tuned to beating some of the lesson decks. But yeah, the Hydra can beat their one unknown card, I think. So take my turn, play Chocobo. Play a land, can even play another Chocobo off the top if I'd like. And yeah, this Hydra's already very deadly. So we can fetch and trigger twice, go up to 30 to trample, and that's game. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand, just need to work through a few tap lanes. But I'll keep. Probably start with Escape Tunnel over Chocobo, so I can maybe play the Cub on 2, which will give me more mana. Facing blue-green, Lanor Elves, so another Banter Mold deck, presumably. So then Tifa going over the top could be a way to break a board stall. But yeah, for now it's gotta be Banter Mole. Turn to Tyvar. Okay, so now I can play an I Still Explorer and then still get back a fetch land if I'd like. Versus Bill plus Tifa, which maybe threatens lethal on the following turn already. So yeah, that's gonna be better. So I guess I want to make use of Bill's landfall since the Tifa one doesn't really matter right now. And then counter on maybe Bill himself. Okay, so next turn I got Fabled Passage plus Ice Still, so we should be able to beat this Ouroboros. Alright, fewer blockers is good. Alright, so just make sure I don't mess up the sequencing here, but should just be pretty simple. Explorer into Fabled Passage. Make sure Bill triggers before Tifa, and then I can go full control. So I can fetch before Tifa's ability resolves. Oh, should have let the +1 counter resolve first there. Oh well, I don't think it's gonna matter too much, honestly. Because if I want to replay a fetch land, I will have to let these triggers resolve anyway. But now I can try and do it properly, so first resolve Bill's +1 counter, and then fetch. So we go up to 11, 12, and then double once, double twice. So yeah, that's going to be more than enough here. Man, we get to rank up. Awesome. So yeah, these green landfall decks have a pretty good matchup against some of the other green Banter Mold decks. Mostly thanks to the Hydra just outgrowing cards like Ouroboros and getting down before Craterhoof Behemoth can take over. But also Tifa, as we saw here, especially when paired with Bill or a fully leveled up Earthbender Ascension, can also deliver the beatdowns and quickly take over a game if the opponent does not have the right answers. The main weakness of a strategy like this is going to be control strategies with plenty of removal, or perhaps something like the mono-black Demons deck. If they can get a Bloodletter down early backed up by some removal, we don't have any way to really stop a big flyer, and that can quickly end the game as well by doubling the damage. So there are some bad matchups out there, although the mono-black Demons is dipping in popularity as of late, so don't expect to face that too often. Control decks are still trying to figure out how to adapt to the new metagame, so there are definitely good opportunities right now to get some quick wins with this landfall deck, and even though this may not have the highest individual win percentage out of any deck in Standard, because the games are over so quickly, I would still recommend it for ranking up on the ladder, because by the time a more controlling strategy maybe racked up 2 or 3 wins, you might have already gotten 6 wins and 2 losses, which overall still gets you ahead of those more controlling decks. So I would highly recommend it, also if you're maybe dipping your toes in Standard for the first time and are maybe considering which deck to build, because most of these cards are not going to rotate anytime soon. The core of the deck with mana creatures and the Hydra are going to stay around for a couple more years since they were part of Foundations, and we've recently gotten some more landfall cards in Final Fantasy as well as Avatar, so all of those cards will stay around for a long time, so the deck should be pretty much rotation proof, and I imagine a turn 2 Hydra is still going to win a lot of games in Standard even in the next few years. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.